The lake house had always been my sanctuary, a place of peace tucked away from the constant noise of city life. After an exhausting year filled with endless meetings and looming deadlines, I couldn't wait to escape to the quiet, wooded edges of the lake. It was the off-season, and most of the neighbors were gone, leaving the area serene and still. The only sounds were the rustling leaves, the occasional loon call across the water, and the gentle lap of waves against the dock. It was everything I needed until I noticed things weren't quite right. At first, it was small things. A lawn chair had been moved. My garden hose, which I always neatly coiled, lay half unrolled near the porch. I blamed it on the wind or maybe a raccoon. But then I found a damp towel hanging in the bathroom one I hadn't used. My unease grew when I discovered the sliding glass door's lock didn't click as firmly as before. Had someone been inside? I couldn't be sure. There were no broken windows, no clear signs of forced entry. Still, a chill settled over me, one that had nothing to do with the autumn air. I checked the security cameras I had installed around the perimeter last summer. Strangely, all of them were offline. My heart pounded as I tried to restart the system through the app, but it showed a no-signal warning. I walked outside to check the devices manually and found that the power cables had been cleanly cut. That wasn't the work of wildlife. Someone had deliberately disabled my security setup. Now it was clear this wasn't just paranoia. Someone had been in my home. I began asking questions around the neighborhood. A few year-round residents acted strangely when I brought up the issue. One man shrugged it off, saying the HOA occasionally conducted property checks when owners weren't present. But I had never authorized any such inspections. I didn't even recall giving them a spare key. The more I pressed, the more uncomfortable people became. Something was wrong, and the quiet community I once loved now felt like a web of secrets. I wasn't going to let it go. I needed to know who had entered my home, and more importantly, why. With the unease growing in my gut, I decided to stop trusting assumptions and start collecting facts. The idea that HOA officers might be entering private homes without consent was disturbing enough, but the fact that they had possibly used my property for personal use made it worse. I needed proof. I installed a small motion-triggered camera hidden in a vent inside the living room. It had its own battery and storage, independent of the previously disabled security system. Then I left the house looking exactly as I had. Found it quiet, empty, and apparently unoccupied. For the next few days, I stayed at a friend's cabin just 10 minutes away, checking in on the feed every evening. The first day was quiet. The second day passed uneventfully too. But on the third day, the motion sensor activated in the early afternoon. My heart pounded as I watched the footage remotely. Two men wearing HOA windbreakers unlocked the front door with ease and stepped inside like they owned the place. They didn't knock. They didn't call out. They simply entered. One of them walked straight to the kitchen, grabbed a soda from my fridge, and leaned against the counter like it was his own home. The other strolled into the living room and sat on my couch, scrolling through his phone. I watched as they opened drawers, looked at papers on my desk, and even tried the bedroom door, thankfully locked. It was clear they weren't performing any kind of inspection. They weren't even pretending. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. These were people who were supposed to maintain order in the neighborhood, not violate it. It wasn't just unauthorized entry, it was trespassing and possibly theft. The footage lasted just over 20 minutes before they exited calmly and locked the door behind them. I downloaded the file immediately, saved it in multiple locations, and made a copy on a flash drive. I wasn't going to risk losing it. That night, I returned to the house, this time with a plan. I left the lights off and parked my car 2 blocks away, entering through the back to avoid notice. I stayed in the guest room, silent and alert. They had broken my trust, and now it was my turn to show them they had picked the wrong homeowner. Rain tapped steadily against the windows as thunder rolled in the distance. The stormy night masked my presence perfectly. I waited in the shadows, heart steady, breath slow, my phone recording just in case. The power flickered once, then steadied, casting eerie flashes through the living room. Around 9:47 p.m., I heard it, the soft click of a key turning in the front door. They were back. The door opened quietly, and two silhouettes stepped inside, their flashlights sweeping across the room. I recognized them immediately: Greg, the smug HOA vice president, and Mark, the supposed maintenance supervisor. They moved casually, like this was routine. Greg muttered something about grabbing the Bluetooth speaker from last time. Confirming this wasn't their first visit, I stepped forward from the hallway, silent until I stood right behind them. "Looking for something?" I said flatly. They froze. Greg spun around, flashlight shining into my face. "You're not supposed to be here," he stammered, caught completely off guard. "Neither are you," I replied, holding up my phone. "I've got last time on camera. And now this, live and in high definition." They tried to spin a story about an emergency HOA check, citing some vague clause from the handbook. But they couldn't explain the soda from my fridge, the rummaging, the cut camera wires. I watched them squirm under the weight of their own arrogance. Their confidence evaporated, replaced by fear. "I suggest you leave," I said, stepping aside and opening the door for them. "Before I call the sheriff, and trust me, I will." They didn't argue. They left quickly, avoiding eye contact, and disappeared into the rain. But this wasn't over. I had everything I needed. Now it was time to expose them. The next morning, I drove straight to the county sheriff's office, flash drive in hand. I gave my full statement, showed them the video footage, and explained everything from the suspicious entries to the cut security wires. The deputy on duty took one look at the clips and nodded grimly. "This isn't a misunderstanding," he said. "This is criminal trespass and likely more." By that afternoon, officers were at my lake house taking statements and photographs. Meanwhile, word spread quickly through the neighborhood. Several neighbors approached me privately, admitting they had experienced strange incidents: two missing items, unlocked doors, unexplained disturbances, but they'd been too afraid or uncertain to speak up. Turns out I wasn't the only one. The HOA board, realizing things were spiraling, tried to control the narrative. They issued a formal statement calling it a miscommunication, suggesting Greg and Mark were simply checking on property welfare after a recent storm. But their excuses didn't hold up. The footage was clear. And so was my intent to hold them accountable. Within a week, both Greg and Mark were placed under investigation. The HOA scrambled to avoid a full-on revolt from the community. Emergency meetings were called. Homeowners demanded accountability, transparency, and most of all, justice. Legal action was set in motion. Greg and Mark were eventually charged with unlawful entry and misconduct under Civil Code. As for me, I changed the locks, reinforced my security, and placed clear signage warning against trespassers. But more than that, I became the voice for my community, the one who stood up when everyone else stayed silent. The lake house was mine again, not just in name but in peace. They had underestimated me. And now, they knew exactly what happened when someone pushed a quiet man too far.